the very lovely and impressive Cheryl Calverley on our show. Cheryl is CEO of EveSleep. And what's really interesting to hear from Cheryl is that she is in her first CEO role, having come up through the marketing function. So a relatively rare breed at that. I've known Cheryl for a little while, and we've met a couple of times through the Marketing Academy Fellowship, so another fine product of the fellowship program. Cheryl's path, which we'll come on to, actually, I was curious. I think I saw from LinkedIn you started as an economic analyst in petroleum for a little while.
You know what I did? No one ever spots that.
Yeah, well, that caught my eye, but thereafter, a more classical marketing career, in fact. So Unilever for about 6 odd years, including working on some of my very personally favorite brands, Marmite and Pot Noodle and Pepperoni. And then a bit more serious into the world of a global role with Lynx and Axe, but a fine start to a career at Unilever. And then in, I think, 2009, Marketing Society Young Marketer of the Year, which is no small accolade. Stint at Birdseye, then at the AA, which we won't talk about too much, competitor of mine. And I know you did some great work there. In fact, you got an IPA Gold in 2018, but we'll just skip through that. And you've been at EveSleep 3.5 years, 2 as CEO, also fellow of the Marketing Society, I think also board member of FE Worldwide. Amazingly impressive trajectory. In a nutshell, Cheryl, I think you are a powerful combination of lots of drive and impact and forcefulness, but also prepared to show your vulnerability, which is also extremely powerful. So it is fantastic to have you on the show. Good morning and welcome.
Great to be here, Mark. Great to be here.
Oh, Cheryl, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And for all you listeners, by the way, I've got a croaky voice, so forgive me, but I'm sure that won't get in the way of the fun that we're going to have for the next couple of 40 minutes or so. So let's get stuck in. Interestingly, by the way, you talked about pot noodle. My favorite pot noodle is the Bombay Bad Boy. And in fact, you may have received a complaint from me because back in the day, I actually complained that it wasn't spicy enough. So there we are. But anyway, moving swiftly on. Cheryl, I just want to hear from you. I mean, how are you doing? What's happening? What's happening in your world?
I'm all right. It's been a very, very hectic week. I have to concede. I work very hard on balancing work and life. I don't really think there's such a thing as a balance because I love work and I love life. But I have done a lot of work this week, so I'm a bit tired. And I must admit, last night when I checked my diary and saw a 7:45. And heart sink, but now I'm here. It's absolutely brilliant to be here.
We torture our guests. That's what happens.
but actually, diving right in there, you are somebody who does seem to have abundant energy, always effervescent, and so let's just dig into that a bit. Where do you draw your energy from?
It's a really interesting question because I don't think anyone knows how much energy they have. They just have their own level of energy. So people always say you're full of energy, and I go, I'm just me. And this is just like saying you're, I don't know, very tall or very short. You're just yourself, aren't you? You don't think about your height any more than you think about your energy. I don't know where I draw it from. I'm an adrenaline junkie, quite frankly. So anything which is interesting, different, competitive, challenging, new, exciting will spice up my life and give me energy. Pandemic was really hard for me because all that got stripped away. And so actually the one time I struggled with energy was probably during the pandemic. We were locked in a small room and not able to do anything competitive or interesting or fun. But yeah, as long as I'm out and about meeting people, doing things, wrapping my mind around things, like my energy just flows and flows. I think the other thing I have realized is when you're weirdly, energy is the opposite to most things, in that if you're low on energy, if you give energy away, I often find that raises my energy. So often if I'm feeling a bit flat, if I can find some time to give some energy to someone else, talk to someone or do a bit of mentoring or go and do something for someone else, my own energy lifts up. So that was a bit of a revelation for me. So I do a lot of mentoring quite selfishly to keep my own energy up.
I find it really interesting that a woman who's got an abundance of energy spends her time probably talking about sleep. And how best to go to sleep and things like that. So I mean, from Unilever AA now into EveSleep, I mean, how did that happen? Like, what excited you about this industry?
So my original background is psychology, and I think anyone that does a degree that they love, and I absolutely love psychology, it sits with you for life. And I have kind of a side gig in neuroscience and psychology, and my bedside table is covered in neuroscience research and stuff. And as a result, when I came into marketing, I found, kind of by accident rather than design, that products that work with the sort of psychobiology of people. So that's basically psychobiology is eating, sleeping, having sex and exercise. It's stuff that you do physically with your body that makes your mind feel things. Products that worked in that space, I enjoyed much more than products that didn't work in that space. So actually working with the AA, I mean, an amazing business, loved my time there, but I didn't enjoy the product as much because it wasn't as rooted in people's psychology. Whereas working in food, which I did at Unilever, I absolutely loved. So when Eve came along, sleep is a massive part of psychology, and actually one of the newest bits of psychology. People don't know a lot about it, and to the earlier comment, I love stuff that is all in a learning space. And I'd done at university, I'd done a lot of work on sleep. I did my long case on sleep. It was a fascination of mine. So when this job came along, it felt like it was sitting right in the sweet spot for me of my fascination with psychology and psychobiology and humans, and what makes humans brilliant and what makes them tick, along with e-commerce and products and marketing and all the stuff I love in life.
Cheryl, revelation, never heard the word psychobiology. You hear people talk around it, but never heard the term. And that's the cleanest explanation I've heard of why people would be interested in going into certain sectors or not. Because of course the cliche is marketing, you can go anywhere and do anything. But being able to relate, not to the product, but the way that the product relates to humans is really, really fascinating. Might be a trivial question, but are you a good sleeper? Is sleep a thing for you, or is it purely the impact on other human beings in the world?
It's really weird actually, because I'm doing a lot of work at the moment in where we take the sleep wellness proposition, and where we take sleep tech and you sort of look at other tech. So you look at fitness tech, health tech. And people are very proud of their exercise. I've cycled this far on Strava, I ran this far, and people are quite proud of their weight, so I managed my calories to this, I lost this much weight. People very rarely are sort of proud of their sleep because it's not something people feel in control of in the same way. So you don't often get people coming in going, I did some amazing sleeping last night, you should have seen my sleeping. It's off the chart sleeping, you guys, you want to sleep like me. But I am really proud of my sleep, so I can sleep pretty much anywhere. You give me a floor and I can sleep on it. You could argue, and it would be argued by any sort of neuropsychologist watching that suggests that I'm chronically sleep deprived. And I would say I am a candle burner. So probably for most of my career, that's because I've been, burning the candle at both ends. But now as I've got older, I am particularly in this job, because the one thing as a CEO is you've always got to turn up. You can't not turn up. You can't have a bad meeting or a meeting where you're just a bit half there, because it upsets people and they think it's because of them, and it's not. I'm very conscious of making sure my sleep is balanced. So if I have a couple of nights of short sleeping because I'm out, burning the candle as I tend to, I'll very consciously have a couple of nights of good sleep to keep myself on an even keel, and that works well for me. So it is a very conscious bit of my life. It's not something I do an awful lot to. I don't sort of have to do lots of wind down routines and things as a lot of other people do, because I'm quite good at it.
How amazing! What a skill. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. It's like people say, you've got. People will say sometimes like, you've got amazing hair. You've got. Thank you. Actually, I don't have amazing hair, but people in life, and it's nothing to do with you. It's just God given. So.
Brilliant. Well, sleep tech is another term that I've never heard of before.
You will hear. I think you'll be hearing a lot more on sleep. Well, I mean,
but by the way, intuitively, I can understand it, and I'm actually surprised that I haven't heard of it. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah, there's lots of research done that actually, with a good night's sleep, your immunity just goes up tremendously, right?
So basically, anything that you want to get better in life, anything, relationships, work, mental acuity, sex life, immunity, health, fitness, anything. The first thing you should do is sleep more. The first thing you should do.
So are you telling me that if I sleep more, or if I prioritize sleep over exercise, it's a better balance?
If you prioritize sleep over exercise, you will find exercise easier, better. You're more willing to do it, and the stuff you do will be more effective. It's really interesting. When I came into Eve, I did strategy work like you do as a good old-fashioned marketeer, and I said, sleep is the third pillar of health and wellness after fitness and diet. And then the more time I've spent in it, the more I've realized it's not. It is the fundamental. So if you are not sleeping, you will not be able to manage your diet. If you're not sleeping, you will not be able to manage your fitness. And actually, if you're not sleeping, you will not be able to manage your mental health. So it's not a pillar. But really, interestingly or not, so one thing people sacrifice. So people who've got a really busy day, they won't go, oh, well, I'm just not going to eat today. I'll sacrifice all my meals. But they will sacrifice sleep. They'll go, I'll just stay up late.
Yeah.
So it feels very optional for people in a way that, you know, eating doesn't, you know.
God.
You went a bit wobbly there, Richie. Okay. Cheryl, you've already alluded to it. I did it in the tee-up as well. So the conversion from marketer to CEO, many but not all marketers dream and vision. But you've done it. You've made that successful transition. So I suppose, quite bluntly, what's the best thing and the worst thing about moving on up?
Oh, no one's actually asked me that. Isn't that interesting? Because I've talked to a lot of people about this because it fascinates people. What's the best thing? I always like to start with the bests, or else they get clouded by the worst. I think the best thing is probably also the worst thing, and it depends on your personality. So the best thing, I think, is it is totally up to you where you put your energy. So all your life, you kind of have an intrinsic belief of this business would be better if we did more. If we focus more on the people, if we focus more on the creative, if we focus more on the commercial. You know, everyone in every business is sort of slightly furious that we're not focusing more on whatever their personal passion is. And when you become a CEO, you get to test that. So I have a very, very, partly because I'm a psychologist and partly because of who I am, I've got a big leaning towards people and culture and development, and that being the source of successful businesses, perhaps over sometimes, you know, strategy or data or some of the harder stuff. That's just my nature. And as a CEO, you're able to really sort of test that out. And the business, you know, businesses, I always say that businesses are a bit like, you know, like dogs come to look like their owners, or owners come to look like their dogs. I always think businesses come to look like their brands, come to look like their marketeers, and businesses come to look like their CEOs. So the business will sort of naturally come to look like you, and it will follow your instincts, and it will talk more about the things you talk more about. So that's the best thing, is you get to test out all the theories you spend your whole life sort of sitting on. I think equally that's also the worst thing, because if you don't put your energy into something, it won't happen. And that's fine until you suddenly realize that one morning. You wake up and you feel a bit, I don't know, like not up for it. Or you notice something and you go, God, why has that not happened? And you realize it's because you've just not put your energy. I was talking to my absolutely brilliant brand director yesterday about our photography. And I have just not sort of put my energy into talking to her about our photography for various reasons. And as a result, she's not had the air cover to be able to drive for better photography. And I was like, oh my God, you know, and I had this moment of epiphany going, why is our photography just not quite as exciting as I want it to be? And it's because I've not gone, right, come on, guys, let's get exciting photography. So sort of the sense of responsibility to create the energy and direction and focus is probably the worst thing, because it feels quite onerous. Yeah. But it's also the best thing.
How fascinating. And you know, I think you're so well placed, perhaps give us a perspective on the legitimacy of marketing in the boardroom, and perhaps how marketers today can, I guess, try and have a larger voice, because of course we are trying to push our perspective versus all the other functions. Do you have a perspective on that, Cheryl?
As you might guess, I do. I think a few things. I think marketing is should be a very broad word. I grew up in FMCG, where marketing, so I grew up understanding marketing as a very broad, and also through my degree and through business studies and through economics and everything. The marketing is 5 Ps. It's everything from your pricing, promotion, your product, your place, all the way through to your positioning. And usually we had a 6th P, which was the promise you're giving your customers, the benefit, if you like. And that means that marketing, there's no debate on marketing having a place in the boardroom, because what is it that a business is doing if it's not all of those things, assuming it's broadly a consumer-facing, product-building business. I mean, clearly there are businesses which are, you know, manufacturing service. I mean, coal mining, I'm not sure they worry so much about their positioning and their promise, but, you know, although I'm sure there's some marketer who would be out there going, God, Cheryl, you don't understand coal mining. And I think it's only when you step out of FMCG and you find marketing, which has been sort of split up over the organization.
Yeah.
And the marketeer is often considered the communicator. You know, so you may be in charge of the advertising and the advertising investment, possibly the customer experience, possibly the customer communications. But everything else has been, you know, how the product works is sitting somewhere else in the organization. The pricing strategy and promotional strategy is sitting somewhere else. The distribution strategy, and particularly in a digital world, is sitting somewhere else. And you suddenly find that marketing is no longer marketing, it is communications. And when marketing is communications, you've got one voice amongst five in a boardroom, where those five voices should represent about a third of the boardroom. So you're 1/15th. And inherently then you end up being kind of 15 people in a boardroom. So then there's a bit of a bun fight over who is the voice. I think that is the tussle. And I do think as marketeers, we've got a couple of options. So one is to stop being so precious about being marketeers, to go, I will have a marketing career that works in all those spaces. And that means there will be times in my career where I'm not in charge of the communication, but I am in charge of the customer experience or the product or the pricing, which means I'm going to have to get freaking good at pricing models. And I can't say, well, what I really like doing is communication. We can't have our cake and eat it. We can't say, I love communication. It's my favorite thing in the world. I need to be doing the creative. But why is my voice not louder? It doesn't work. If you want to be a serious voice in a boardroom, you have to be able to talk of all 5 Ps, which in lots of organizations means at some point in your career, spending some time just on one of the Ps that's not, or 2 or 3 that aren't communications. And that is a really, I spend a lot of time talking to people I mentor on this. It's a difficult one to tussle with because you don't have to do that. And then most of us would sit there and go, oh shit, well that's just not enjoyable. And that's absolutely fine. But you do have to wrestle that to the ground within yourself if you're also pushing for, I want to be in the boardroom. But having said all of that, the most important thing, and I did a bit of a talk at the Festival of Marketing last week on this, we are the only people in the organization who is focused on customers, humans, and what they do and not what they think, and focused on the future, not the past. So your data team will say that they are focused on humans and customers, what they think, and they absolutely are, but they tend to be focused on the customers they can see and the data they can see. The marketeer's job is to be insights, to go, where is the market going? Where are consumers going? What do they want? What is the future? What is not the faster horse? And we are the only people who have that responsibility. And I think to some extent we have lost our eyeline on that because we are a bit rabbit in the headlights with the quantity of data you now have on what people are doing today and what they did yesterday and what they did 3 weeks ago. We've lost our ability to go, yeah, that's great. But my job is to go, what are they going to do? And how do I deliver something great for them and take us forwards?
Fantastic insights, Cheryl. Not least, in some sectors, the Ps are scattered across all parts of the organization. So to be a rounded marketer, you have to define yourself beyond the function itself. I'm going to do a complete 180 on what I said before about not talking about the AA. And obviously you can only probably say so much, but the reason you won the IPA Gold was because you re-energized the organization around a brand orientation away from performance marketing. And that will be a challenge that many, many marketers face. How do I get off the drug of performance marketing and reinvigorate brand? Can you say a little bit about how you sold that story in and the impact it had?
I would love to say I did some ground selling. I didn't need to. I had a very, very brilliant, I don't know what it was at the time. He was probably commercial director or something at the time. So a gentleman called Mike Lloyd and a team around me who understood what we could see in the business. So I think the most important thing in getting any transformation or change in attitude to happen is to work out where the burning platform is. Yeah. So you could come into the AA, and I talked about this in the IPA. So if anyone reads the paper, you'll see this at length. You could come into the AA and say everything was going hunky dory, with a bit of intelligent thinking, and that's not to say people aren't intelligent, but a bit of properly strategic, data-driven commercial thinking. You could run the metrics forward on customers, which we did, and see that what looked rosy was actually way beyond the tipping point. If we continue to do what we were doing, the business was going to sort of go to nothing within sort of 6 and 10 years, depending where you wanted to draw your boundaries. As soon as you do that, and it wasn't me that did that. I mean, my boss was the guy going, this doesn't look as rosy as it is. I don't feel comfortable. And there is a little bit of gut feel going, this doesn't feel comfortable, doesn't feel right. And we all know instinctively you need to build brand for sustainable long-term growth. We all know instinctively that continually putting prices up is not sustainable. So it doesn't take a lot. You get to a burning platform, and then it's a really easy conversation. Well, the burning platform sits here. Therefore, what we need to do is reduce our price elasticity and reduce, the cost, the sort of what's an increasing cost to new customers. The only way to do that is to put more value into the product. That gives us 2 choices. We either create more value in the brand, or we create more value literally in the tangibility of the product. Create more value in the tangibility of the product, yes, but that's not a click your fingers thing. It needs to happen, but this is the AA. This is 3 to 5 years of organizational change. Create more value in the brand, that is something you can do fairly quickly with a shift in your investment strategy, a shift in your creative strategy, a shift in your messaging, because inherently, when you step back, so the AA is an incredibly brand-led organization, and it's hard. That's not about brand advertising. It's about what is the AA. The AA understands what it sells as an amazing promise. And so it's quite an easy conversation to go, well, let's take what we know we do and what customers know we do. Let's elevate it and talk about it. That will close some of this value gap and give us some breathing space to improve the product. So that was a lot of noise. I think the answer is, what is your burning platform? And if, by the way, that burning platform can come from someone else in the organization, it is significantly easier to sell it in, because the market is much easier to turn up with the answers as the marketeer than the questions, because people quite often don't like the questions from marketers. They tend to be a little bit intangible. So if your finance director or your CFO or your commercial director or someone else has got a burning platform that you can go, brilliant, that is the reason why we need to change our strategy. It's a much easier conversation, and you're doing it, there's two voices doing it rather than one.
I can't believe this, that we're having this conversation, really, because I'm a massive Les Binet fan. And so I watch all his videos, and he did this amazing case study on the AA, which I never joined the dots to until this moment. And he obviously, they talked about how they were reshaping the brand versus performance lens. And I think what his rationalization, perhaps certainly from a marketing perspective, was the difference between efficiency and effectiveness of marketing. And I wonder if there's a perspective that you could lend on that, whether that's with the AA or maybe even further removed from that now. But just around, when dealing with marketing, whether, we need to go for effectiveness or efficiency.
The one thing I would absolutely say is there is definitely not an answer. And I get a bit cross with, I love Les. Les is a really, really good, really good friend of mine, actually. And I think he's back in the game, actually. So welcome back, Les, if you're watching. And Mark Ritson and people, they go, we just need to be investing more in brand. We just need to be investing more in brand. At any one point in time, you need to be investing the right thing for your market and brand circumstances. So right now at Eve, we are in a difficult market. If you're in a high ticket item e-commerce business at the moment, it is not what it was 2 years ago. Clearly, consumers are less keen to buy a new mattress now that they've got the gas prices going through the roof. Now is not the right time to be investing huge amounts in effectiveness, particularly in a business which has got limited cash reserves. So that would be a stupid thing to do. If I was in a different business right now, I'd be investing differently. And by the way, in 6 months' time, I'll be investing differently in Eve again. So there is absolutely not a should we do this or that. There is a constant readjustment of where is your business, where is your market, what is your cash position, what are the pressures on you as a business leader, what's your board asking you to do? Because fundamentally we work for customers, but to deliver to a board. And I've got a set of people investing in my business, it's their money I'm spending. What are we trying to do as a business? And only then can you balance. Now the problem is, if you are constantly then making the same decision on investment and not adjusting, and the business is not going the right direction, that's when you need to adjust. But that doesn't mean that your new strategy is then the right strategy for the next 20 years. You constantly need to, there isn't an answer. You constantly need to be flexing, optimizing, going, right, we'll push for effectiveness. No, it's an efficiency time. Let's tighten. No, we can invest for effectiveness. We can build. So I always think of, I talk to my team, like there's kind of build and harvest. There's build or, reap and sow. There's times to reap and there's times to sow. And any, farmer, from years gone by would know there are seasons when you reap and there are seasons when you sow.
Yes.
And it's knowing where you are in that reap and sow cycle, I think.
So the 60-40 rule is out the window.
There's times when it should be 70-30. There's times it should be 30-70. There's times when, quite frankly, you should try and not spend as much anything if you possibly can. There's times when you should go nuts. I mean, it's reap and sow.
It depends.
Yeah.
It depends. No, so that's a good answer. Love the build, harvest, reap, sow metaphor. Now, 2009, Young Marketer of the Year. Impressive.
A long time ago now, Mark.
Long time ago, but the relevance being that the School of Marketing is built to help people get into marketing and in the early stages of their career. So if you can go back in time, what do you think helped you to build towards that accolade? How did you build your career in the early days? And obviously, Unilever is a classical place to start to get on. But what do you think helped you in those early days of building your marketing career?
Quite frankly, a brilliant boss. I mean, it's not necessarily the most useful advice in the world, but for anyone out there going, who's sort of twisting and turning on their career and what they do, I work for three things. I work for a business. So is the business, as in the culture and the setup and the organization, the right one for me? I work for a brand. So do I believe in what I'm selling? Do I love my customers? Can I find a way to love my customers? Am I passionate about it? And for me personally, I have to feel it makes a difference to their lives. So I'm quite egotistic, and I need a customer to infuse to me about my product. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning, is seeing a smile on someone's face because of something that I am a part of. And I work for a boss. So that's someone that believes in me, supports me, develops me, trusts me, asks me difficult questions, all that sort of stuff. You normally won't get all three, or you're very lucky if you get all three. I'm very lucky right now, I've got all three, but I've had to work. It's taken me a long time to finally get to all three. You need 2 from 3, I think, to build a career. So you need 2 of a brilliant business, one that really suits you culturally and helps you thrive culturally and with its support, a brilliant boss, or a brand you're passionate about. You can put up with a terrible culture, actually, if you've got a great boss and a great brand. Or you can put up with a brand you're not that passionate about if your boss is amazing and your culture is amazing. You can't put it, I don't think, for developing your career, you should have any less than 2 from 3. Unilever, I was really lucky. So amazing boss, found a guy called Matt Burgess, who entrepreneurial businessman, wasn't a marketeer particularly, but sort of just a brilliant leader. Brands I really loved what they did in people's lives. I love pot noodles. Everyone goes, Marmite's amazing. Marmite is amazing. Pot noodles is an incredible brand, actually, and for people that love pot noodle, it has the most fun part in their life. And the stories going out on customer insight sessions with pot noodle users, just the best fun, and they loved it. Unilever culture, an amazing culture, actually not probably the right culture for me as a person. Didn't mean I didn't love it, and it was a fantastic organization to learn in, so it was the right business probably. But I spent a lot of time, and I got to the end of my graduate scheme at Unilever, and they said, you've not passed. So Unilever had 12 competencies, and it had like typical Unilever, lot of matrix. So many, I can't remember, so many core competencies and so many extra competencies, and you had to get in the top whatever on the core competencies. And I'd done incredibly well on change catalysm and sort of basically all the creative entrepreneurial sort of things. They were like, you're off the charts, you're really, really strong, you're the best we've seen, your actual performance is amazing. But some of the really core competencies, so at the time, one which was called strategic influencing, which was basically diplomacy and understanding how to work through the organization by influencing people, but not people directly. And one which is called organizational awareness. So understanding, in a different podcast, I describe this in a different way, but I'm not going to do it here, so I don't know who's listening, but understanding who has relationships with whom in the organization that may not be obvious relationships, shall we say, and therefore who you need to navigate around and how the power plays work. I hate that, absolutely hate it. It's so far from me as a person. I'm not diplomatic, and most people know that. I'm not very good at politics. I think it's a massive waste of time. I could never really get my head around it. And at least one of those was core competencies, and they said, look, you have not passed. And so I had to do another sort of 6 months, which I was furious about. And I systematically wrote down the description of every competency, and then I kept a spreadsheet to prove all the moments. And at the end of the 6 months, I put it in front of them. I said, look, I've hit all your marks. And they said, well, yeah, you've hit the marks, but you've done it through gritted teeth. I'm like, yeah, I bloody have. And they said, well, we don't quite know what to do with you because you're not a Unilever person. We can't see you being global brand director of Flora. And they were bloody right. But because Unilever was great, and actually because Matt was amazing, we had this little set of businesses, and they said, we've got this little set of businesses. They're actually all, at that time, I think I can say all this now, it's a long time ago, they're all on our sell list. They're all up for sale, because none of them are strategically organized well into the business. They were all in double-digit decline, of which Marmite was one at the time. So we have Marmite, Bovril, Elmley, and Borsan, and they ended up selling Borsan very quickly. But if you want to go and run them as a unit and go and see, because you are clearly slightly entrepreneurial, you go and see what you can do with them and see if, and go play. But you're not right to come in the middle of our global matrixed organization. You're not going to be able to navigate through Persil. And they were right. And it was amazing. And so I had this fantastic time running these amazing brands. I got complete freedom, worked with Matt and a business unit team. So I was alongside the factory manager and the category manager and my colleague Noam, who's wherever now. And we had complete freedom to try and do something. Because if we didn't do something, they were just getting sold. And I was, subtext, you're probably also out, but never mind, let's worry about that then. was young. And it was great. And we turned around, and then we got pot noodle as well, and pepperami as well, and I can't believe it's not butter for a bit. And we had an amazing time and total freedom. But that definitely, I did not get to the end of the Unilever grad scheme with a big tick, you're amazing for Unilever. I got you're clearly really good at something, but it's not quite what we're looking for,
Cheryl, you're warming my heart with all these brands. Pot noodle, pepperami. You're taking me back.
Very lucky.
Very cool. Very cool. And it's interesting, by the way, I relate wholeheartedly to what you were talking about in that political aspect of things. So I grew up on the HSBC grad scheme in a very similar styled sort of thing, where it certainly wasn't on paper, but it was very much an undercurrent about how do you work out the organization dynamic. So I totally see what you're going, and clearly I didn't last there too long either. But I want to ask something quite pertinent in this area, because there'll be lots of young people, or people more generally, who often feel like they have to stay in a job for a period of time just to kind of make it not look like there's a mark on their CV. And it's a big thing, right? If you're not happy somewhere, the dilemma is, do you leave quickly because you want to be happy where you want to go? Or do you kind of play it out a little bit because you don't want to kind of, have a little black mark on the CV, which questions people in their careers? So I wondered if you have a perspective on what sort of part of that dynamic should you be playing if you're in that position?
I have a very strong view, which you should stay and do something. So fundamentally, it takes about 2 to 3 years really to prove whether you've done anything and to find out whether you've done anything. So if you are somewhere and the culture is damaging you, then obviously go, right? I mean, that's without question. If it's a damaging culture that is not going to let you do anything, which is hurting you, which is keeping you up at night, which is making you well, clearly go. If it is not that, if it is anything else, if it is that you don't like your boss, you're not mad at the brand, you've not got the money you thought you were going to get, you don't particularly like your team, whatever, do something. Use it as a learning experience. You absolutely will be in jobs where those things happen, and they happen for periods of time and things change. Learning how to handle different problems and work through them and take that learning and then get to the end of a period of time and go, what did I learn? Absolutely crucial. And the sooner you learn that, and the sooner you build your, I can look back over my, when I'm sitting in a difficult meeting or facing a difficult circumstance, I can look back over my career and I can just go, oh yeah, we'll remember that time when, for 6 months I was dealing with this, for 9 months, and nothing can be as bad as ... in my mind. Nothing can be as complicated as ... I can never be as out of my depth as I was ... So absolutely, as I say, unless it is culturally damaging, stay. If you've got a terrible boss, right? How do you navigate your way through the organization to a different boss? How do you find a way to work around your boss? How do you use having a terrible boss as a learning experience to manage a terrible boss? How do you use that to learn about the boss you don't want to be? How do you take learning? The whole first 15, 20 years of your career is all you get when you get senior. Because when you get senior, learning gets much, much harder to get hold of. So you've got to get as much as you bloody can in, because you never know. Still now, suddenly I'll be in a meeting and I'll think about something I learned when I was 23. Oh God, that's just like that moment. Yeah, and you've got to have as much in your learning library of circumstances and people and challenges and stuff to be able to go to as you possibly can. So I'm a firm believer, as culture aside, I mean, if the culture is damaging, you must go. But I'm a firm believer in taking as much learning opportunity as you can. And I don't think I've ever left a job in less than 3 years, and I normally wouldn't choose to, because I would look at myself and go, what did you really learn if you were there less than 3 years? And generally speaking as well, everything changes about every 9 to 12 months. So the way it is now, it will undoubtedly change.
That's a fantastic insight, and particularly going to double down on that point about you refer back to things when you were 23. So people in the young stages of their career don't underestimate how much benefit might come from the toughest times that you face today, as we all have faced. Now, Cheryl, change direction a little bit. So you are a strident person, you're forthright, and you said you're not necessarily born to be a diplomat. But I've been in a conference where you changed the whole dynamic of everything by showing some vulnerability. And it was about something you were really passionate about, and you shed a tear, and it did change the dynamic of the room. So I'm interested to know how vulnerability sits alongside, a force of nature character.
I had entirely forgotten you were in that room that day. Yeah, that was a moment. Yeah, I don't know. It's a really, yeah, it's a difficult one. So, and it's funny because my chairman sort of says, you wear your heart on your sleeve, and I feel like I spend a lot of time, controlling myself. So again, it's back to what you're used to. I don't have anything to fear in life. So if I lost my job tomorrow, fine, I go and get. I'd love to be a painter decorator. I'm sure I could probably make some money doing that. So I don't go to work fearing I'm going to lose my job. If people decide they hate me because of a decision that I've made or an opinion I've got, again, don't really mind because I've got great friends and husband and kids and life, and it doesn't really matter to me. There's only a few people actually in my life whose opinions really matter to me, and that would matter. Nothing can really hurt me. It's just business. The worst that can happen is, well, a business goes bust, and that would be pretty stressful, but it's just business. Yeah, it's just stuff. It's just life. And in the grand scheme of things, that's nothing. And I think keeping it in perspective is really important. I think once you lose the fear, you can then just be yourself, and you are not scared to expose how you're feeling. I think it's very, very difficult for women. And when I get angry, I cry, like a lot of women. Men shout, women cry. Generalizing, but that sort of seems to be the habit. And I think there's a forgiveness for men getting angry and an expectation for men to get angry, and that's fine. He's passionate and he cares. And there's a feeling that when women cry, they're sort of weak. And I sort of don't hold much truck with that. So if I get angry, upset, frustrated, something cuts me deeply, I think it's important that I show that, and I'll try and tell people why, so it doesn't look like I'm just sort of randomly disintegrating. And there are definitely circumstances when I've known that I'm vulnerable for other reasons. And then I'm very conscious, because I think if you're going to show vulnerability at work about the work, you need to be clear it's about the work. If you're going to show vulnerability at work, but it's to do with home life, you need to tell people that that's going on in your home life, or else they think it's about the work. So I think what I'm saying, I realize I'm talking around it, I think what I'm saying is vulnerability is something you need to be, I'm very happy to show it, but I think it's knowing that you're going to show it and helping to signal to people around you what it is that's got you to suddenly put your heart on your sleeve, because it can be just, in that room, I think I explained, why, but it can be disturbing to people to suddenly have the vulnerability. I do think women need to do it more, because I think we're quite used to men doing it, and we kind of let that roll over. Oh, he's just got outside. I think when women do it, to your point, it changes the dynamic of the room. I'd like to get to a place where when I get upset and shed a tear, people go, oh, she clearly really cares. All right, fine. And we crack on. I think the fear I have with vulnerability is that it causes a fuss. And I think particularly, again, as a woman, there is a habit for people to sort of slightly flap, sort of offer you cups of tea and smelling salts. And actually, you really don't want this. You just want, this is a piece of emotion which has gone along with this thing we're doing, because this thing we're doing is touching on a particular set of values of mine. Here's my values and here's what's touching. Please accept my emotion in the room, so you understand, this is a big thing for me, and therefore that's the context. But please, let's not this whole conversation now be about my emotion. That's not what I want. I think we need to get that. But having said all of that, I did try and show vulnerability in a board meeting. So my a relative of mine went to prison, and I tried to show vulnerability. He went to prison the morning of a board meeting. Well, he was in court the morning of a board meeting, and I was trying to explain to my board why I might not be totally present in the board meeting as I should be. And it was just about the most tumbleweed moment I've ever had, and I completely regretted it. So I do think you just sometimes you just need to sometimes, as I say, be in control and sort of choose when you let the vulnerability out, but do play with it and experiment with it and let it out, because if you just hold it inside, it doesn't work. But it all comes from a place of imperviousness. Nothing can hurt me.
It's there's such power in what you've just said, and the one takeaway that I was thinking around, and particularly when you started off with you don't have any fear. And I know you talked about that in a different dimensions, but actually the one thing that you first said was actually, if tomorrow I lost my job, I would really want to become a painter decorator, and I'm sure I can make money from that. I know
my husband would be furious that I'd said that, by the way, so he wouldn't be happy with
that. But I tell you what, there's a fundamental lesson in that, I think. And very early on in my career, what I learned by working for big corporates was I wasn't confident in truly the art of making money, despite the fact that I was working for massive businesses, because I was so far removed from that bottom line. And it was only in the last 9 years when I've literally ran my own P&L in my job, do I now truly understand the levers of actually what business really happens and works. And I think that's so important, to give you that confidence about nothing can harm me, because I know the fundamentals of how this mechanism works, which allows me, no matter what context I'm in, to be able to push through and go for it. So I think there's something really powerful in there, which I don't think enough credit is given to in when you're working for big corporates out there. But I just want to touch on, and the last sort of anecdote you gave us was around the boardroom, and I suspect we're coming to the last question now. And I've been actually quite fascinated over the last couple of weeks of watching The Apprentice. And so I simply just want to ask, what is your nature in the boardroom? And if you have people sitting around you, what would they say is sort of epitomizes you as the leader in that boardroom?
I'm going to speak probably about my exec team rather than, so the board I'm speaking of is when I'm I'm subservient to, well, I'm meant to be subservient. I'm not really going to be subservient, but I'm meant to be subservient to the chairman. Talk probably about the exec team where we're a team of peers with my team. What's my nature? Oh, I think it depends on where the business is at. So can I describe how I'd like my nature to be, and then I can describe probably how my team describe it. So I'd like to say my nature is sort of supportive and open. I'm quite light, so I'm not massively formal. I find agendas difficult. I find conversations very important, so I always run over time, which pisses everyone off. I like to get to decisions. I like content to be presented in a way that can get to decisions, that it's insightful, that it's useful, and that it drives good conversation. I like good conversation. I like a bit of jousting. I'm very comfortable with a bit of confrontation. And I like that around the table. I'm also very aware of underdogs in the room. So I work best, like a lot of extroverted thinkers, I work best with an introvert. And I like the introverts around the room and try and bring them in. So that's what I would love to describe. I've got this open, lovely, listening, debating, jousting, supportive. I think my team would say in good times, it probably is like that, and very warm and a nice place to be, a good fun place to be. We as a team, we have a good time. I think we're a team that other people look at and go, I want to be in that gang, which I think is quite important. I think under pressure, I can be, and I'm a bit more, I'm very directive. So, and I've got, my patience is not what it should be, particularly under pressure. Under pressure, I become particularly aware of the different styles in the room and trying to sort of think about the different styles, which can then mean that I veer into actually it's that style I want the data-driven decision-making, directional style, which can then close out the more reflective thinkers. It can close out the more creative thinkers. I've just been through a team away day, and I definitely took some fairly fierce feedback. I've had a very hard start to the year personally, which has meant I've not been as present as I want to be with the team. I took some clear feedback around closing things down and not listening, which is definitely my worst. And you'll hear me talk all the time. People say, what's the skill? What's the skill? What do you need to develop? And I go, listening. It's my big thing. I'm about half the way to a journey of being a good listener, which is so much further than I was. It is definitely not a lion's den, but I'm quite fast intellectually. And I think, and certainly I hear, that it can be a bit intimidating if I'm under pressure and we need to get through stuff and I want to just canter through stuff. I can tend to be a bit intellectually intimidating, I think, as well, which can be inspiring for some, can be not great for others.
Joe, it's a great way to end, because it ends with you saying, I'm still a work in progress. I've had this amazing...
God, yeah, Jesus Christ. Anyone who says they're not...
I've done these amazing things, but not the finished article, and don't pretend to be. Cheryl, I've loved this conversation. So many things. I mean, the job to wrap it up is quite hard, but I'll do my best. You're an adrenaline junkie. The energy just pours through in everything that you say. Learned a bit, psychobiology, sleep tech, the intersection of psychology and neuroscience and human beings. Fascinating. And to hear you talk about needing to connect with the impact on customers' psychobiology. Being a CEO, it's not always easy. You always got to get up. You always got to show up. Got to turn up, and you have to choose where you put your energy. And there are impacts upon where you do and don't put your energy. In the context of a burning platform, turn up with the answers. Great advice. Brand, it depends. Build and harvest, reap and sow. Be flexible. You need 2 out of 3 of being in a good business with a good brand or a good boss. Ideally all 3, but at least 2. Stay and do something. Work it through. Take the learnings. You refer back to what you learned when you were 23. Pack in your learning library. But perhaps the biggest thing is that you do wear your heart on your sleeve. You don't have fear. Impervious. And if there was one word that screams out, it's kind of a defiance. And it just pours out because you said, you just said off the cuff, I'm not very good at being subservient. You just like sort of flip that through, but there's an honesty to that and a self-awareness to that. And I'm sure that inspires those around you as you have inspired us this morning. So thank you very much for your time, Cheryl.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.
Cheryl, honestly, just want to echo everything Mark said. It's just been phenomenal. I take my hat off to you. Absolutely brilliant session. Really enjoyed it. And yes, good luck with everything and all your endeavors.